big update coming in. President Trump has spoken to Prime Minister Modi, is what Ambassador of the United States to India, Sergio Gor, says. He says that President Donald Trump just spoke to PM Modi. They've discussed the ongoing situation in the Middle East, including the importance of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. Big development coming in there with, in fact, the US Ambassador confirming that particular conversation where, of course, there's been, of course, a dialogue between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. Srinjoy is joining us. Srinjoy, very, very important conversation. The Prime Minister, of course, has been engaging with various heads of state, particularly the countries that have been impacted with the recent conflict, and now a conversation happening with President Trump. Any update on what really was discussed?
The Straits of Hormuz was on the top of the agenda. It was an important conversation, and the Prime Minister and the President both spoke about the necessity of ensuring that the situation came back to normal. This is a particularly important conversation because India is making it very clear that India wants peace and India wants the entire thing to be settled. If you remember, Prime Minister Modi has spoken with the President of Iran, President Pezeshkian. He is now speaking with the President of the United States. So quite naturally, it's important to find the solution to this problem. Today was the first day of the so-called truce, quote unquote, and there was still some isolated incidents. So the longer this truce holds, 5 days at least, and then perhaps more, the better it is.
Okay.
So this
Srinjoy, stay with us because I believe Sagarika has the tweet with her. Sagarika, quickly take us through what exactly are the contents of that social media post.
So, Ambassador Sergio Gor has posted just a while ago, Madhav, that President Donald Trump just spoke with Prime Minister Modi. They discussed the ongoing situation in the Middle East, including the importance of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. A three-line tweet, but one, it gives us an indication that it is US President Donald Trump who just spoke with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, we are still waiting for more details. Hotlines are active. Who spoke to who? But who made the first phone call? These are details that we are still awaiting. But yes, the ambassador now saying that President Trump spoke to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They discussed the situation in the Middle East coming a day after that pause that has been it, and that 5-day window that has been now being explored by both the US President and Iran. Now, they have also discussed, most importantly, the discussion of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open. Remember, US President Donald Trump also said that it could be a possibility that based on how these talks go on over the next 5 days, Iran and the United States can jointly control the Strait of Hormuz, a claim that has been completely contradicted by Iran and the IRGC. But in the latest, it is Donald Trump who's spoken to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Sagarika, for that quick update. I believe Rishabh is also with us. Rishabh, a very important conversation there happening between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. What is very, very significant is that India would have discussed its own interests and particularly its own energy security, as well as the fact that there are close to 1 crore Indians who are present in all of those Gulf countries.
Well, definitely, Madhav. The build-up to this call is also very, very interesting. In the last 24 hours, we have seen the Deputy Secretary of War for Policy in India speaking. Then External Affairs Minister Dr. Shankar speaking to his counterpart in the United States, and also hosting the GCC ambassadors in Delhi, discussing with them the whole issue of West Asia. And after that, we hear that Prime Minister and President Donald Trump has spoken. So on table of discussion would be West Asia crisis, energy security, Indian nationals. Remember, we have a diaspora of about 90 million there. So that is also very, very important.
Okay. Sushant Sarin, strategic affairs expert, is joining us now. Sushant Sarin, very, very important conversation. Now, India clearly would be expressing its concerns. The importance of keeping the Strait of Hormuz open is what we understand is on top of the agenda. Now, taking this forward in terms of ensuring India's energy security, of ensuring connectivity for the entire Gulf, how do you think this conversation would have gone, and how significant and how important is it coming as it does in the middle of this conflict, Sushant?
Yeah, Madhav, it's very difficult to say how significant it is going to be because ultimately you don't know what you are really negotiating with and what you are whether what you have spoken to the American president is what you will get. Ultimately, they will make decisions which may or may not work out in the favor of other countries and in favor of peace in the region. Now, Donald Trump has let out this thing since yesterday that some conversations are ongoing with Iran, but what is the incentive for Iran to accept what the Americans are offering? And from whatever reports have come out, the Americans are offering what was already on the table before they started this war. So what is in it for Iran to relent at this point in time when, at least in public perception, despite all the destruction and devastation that has been visited upon Iran and by extension to other Gulf countries and rest of the world, what is the incentive for Iran to stop at this point in time when in the global perception it is on the ascendant? It has successfully managed to keep everybody hostage. What else is President Trump offering Iran at this point in time? And have they asked India to play some kind of a role? We don't know. Should India be ready to play some kind of a role? It depends on whether, either side wants to discuss this with sincerity. Because otherwise, it is a pointless exercise trying to get, people to talk to each other when they're not interested in a negotiated solution. And then, of course, there are serious concerns about Israel as well. Israel's own security is at stake. And assurances will have to be given, cast iron assurances to Israel about its security and the existential crisis that Israel faces. So you cannot remove Israel from the equation. So it's a difficult situation, but at least to the extent that India is in conversation with not only Gulf states but also with the countries like the United States and Israel and Iran, which are the combatants in this conflict. There's something to be said for it, but whether something comes out of it or not is anybody's guess.
All right. So, Sushant, stay with us. We also have Pathikrit Pain joining us on the phone line. Pathikrit, very significant given that India, of course, is in touch with Iran. India is in touch with Israel, as Sushant Sarin said, as well as the United States, apart from the impacted Gulf countries. But having said that, how much significance do we attach to this conversation as it happens to be in the midst of this conflict? Pathikrit.
Well, I think there are critical times for the world, and if there are conversations happening between the largest democracy and the biggest democracy, oldest democracy of the world, then it's fine because stability is very important. From the Indian perspective, I think communication with Americans are as important as the communication with the Russians in terms of ensuring that there is resilience of the supply chain so far as these countries are concerned. However, if there is any, first of all, we are not aware of what are the contours of the conversation. But if the Americans are expecting that India should come in and negotiate and play a constructive role, then I don't think the Indians can do much more than anything more than ensuring their own interest first, because as Sushant ji also rightly mentioned, this is a very, very complex situation in Middle East where the end objective of Israel and United States are very, very different. They are themselves, there's no convergence in terms of their own end objectives. So for India to come in and, negotiate, that will not be possible. In fact, we have often seen that when it comes to these kind of conflicts, the West starts it without taking anybody's permission or taking anyone into confidence. And when the mess arrives, they want countries like India to step in either with army or something else. We know what happened in case of, U.S. war on terror in Afghanistan.
Right.
In 2002 and 2003, they wanted Indians to put in Indian foot soldiers in Afghanistan because we had good relation with Afghans. That was not feasible and India refused. So in this case also, it is very difficult for India to take a side, and we don't want to take a side. This is a conflict.
So what exactly is meant by that phrase, keeping the Strait of Hormuz open? What exactly is the ask? What exactly is the thought process going on? Because there are many options, including the possibility of military intervention or navies physically being present in the Gulf is concerned. That's a thought that has been expressed. It is a thought that has also been abandoned. But what really is the conversation on at the moment? That's something we'll continue to track. Pathikrit Pain, as well as Sushant Sarin and my colleagues Srinjoy and Rishabh and Sagarika for joining us. I'd like to thank all of you. We're going to slip into a quick break, but this is the big story. We're going to continue to track all developments in relation to this on the other side. Stay tuned.